For those of you who've been living under a rock and aren't up to date on the horror genre, there's been a new trend of taking a public domain character and basically making a horror movie about them. Last year, it happened to Winnie the Pooh, and this year, the first cartoon from Walt Disney featuring Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, entered the public domain. So of course, a bunch of studios barreled over one another to be the first to put out a Mickey Mouse horror film. There's been an inundation of Mickey Mouse horror, most of them simply going for the lowest common denominator and putting a mouse mask on a killer, and then having him go around and kill annoying people for an hour and a half. In fact, while there are differences between the movies I'm about to cover, that's pretty much the plot to all of them. Still, I watched as many of these Steamboat Willie horror films as I could, so you don't have to. And the following is basically me telling you whether it's worth your precious time and money. All aboard! Let's take a look at some Mickey Mouse public domain horror. First up is The Mousetrap, aka Mickey's Mousetrap. It's streaming on Tubi. It was directed by Jamie Bailey and written by Simon Phillips. A group of friends decide to throw a surprise birthday party for their friend Alex, played by Sophie McIntosh, but unbeknownst to them, a short circuit during a showing of the black and white cartoon Steamboat Willie, starring the first ever incarnation of Mickey Mouse, creates a masked serial killer with powers of teleportation and a wicked sense of humor. Finding themselves chained inside of the arcade, Alex and her friends must use their wits to survive the night against the monster from an age-old children's cartoon. First out of the gate, after Mickey Mouse's first ever appearance in the Walt Disney cartoon Steamboat Willie became a public domain property, is The Mousetrap. And while there are a few interesting ideas, the rush to be first in what has turned out to be a slew of Mickey Mouse horror movies proves to be the film's true downfall. First the good, or at least the decent. I love actor Simon Phillips. He was the true standout in the movie Butchers from a few years ago as a charismatic but barbaric cannibal hillbilly, and also gave a notable performance as the maniacally laughing madman clad in a Santa Claus costume in The Nights Before Christmas. Any movie with Phillips in it is better for it, but I don't think even a talented presence like Phillips could save this movie. Phillips also seems to have written The Mousetrap, and while there are hints of a good movie in there somewhere, it just fails to hit the mark most of the time. I like the way Phillips becomes this maniacal Mickey Mouse, blending a bent mind with a somewhat supernatural concept of teleporting from one area of the massive arcade space to another. I believe this film was trying to attempt to make another Terrifier concept with franchisable possibilities, but I don't know if it'll work, as there's no rhyme or reason as to why this serial killer is killing these people, or how he attained these teleportation powers. Phillips is the manager of the arcade, and he seems to be a fan of Steamboat Willie, and even has a vintage mask of the character in a glass case. After getting off of his shift at the arcade, he simply sits down to watch the classic cartoon, and then inexplicably becomes the masked killer. Why? No idea is given, but it does get this film rolling, and I guess once the bodies start dropping, we're supposed to be so enthralled with the story and the killing that we don't ask such logical questions. But the characters, like the story itself, feel half-baked. These characters are cookie-cutter outlines forced to spout awful dialogue. Unmercifully, the film is in dire need of a solid edit, as the stilted moments between line deliveries go on uncomfortably long. Aside from a few standouts, the cast really has trouble delivering the lines with any weight. There are some acting standouts, though, notably the lead, Sophie McIntosh, the goth chick, Mackenzie Mills, Jock Ben Harris, and of course Simon Phillips. But the true problem with this film is that it fails to answer the question, why? Why did Phillips' character get these powers? Why does he like Steamboat Willie so much? Why is he killing people? Why is this killer's weakness a strobe light? The entire film lacks motivation or reasoning. It's as if the producers only saw the opportunity to sully the Mickey Mouse property and took it without really developing a solid idea as to what would make someone kill someone else while wearing a Mickey Mouse mask. I don't want to help these people out by providing ideas, but honestly, I can think of a handful of reasons why such a beloved property would be pushed to kill, but this film doesn't even try to make sense of it all. Meaning that The Mousetrap is simply a cash grab, alerted at the very instant the Mickey Mouse property went public domain, and thinking of the least creative way to make a horror movie out of it. There are a few scenes where the weird Mickey Mouse mask works, Early on, Phillips in the mask does a little run towards the camera that reminded me of Leatherface in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was a goofy and almost playful run after the screaming victims, but it was really the only time the film really captures the creepy aspects of this masked killer. It looks as if a sequel is in the works entitled The Mousetrap, Welcome to the Mickeyverse. Here's hoping more time is spent on the script, characters are given proper motivation, and especially dialogue, actors are given a chance to work on their line delivery, proper edits are made to get rid of the uncomfortable silences, and for Christ's sakes, some sense of what the hell is going on, and most importantly, why the hell does this movie exist, are elements added to the upcoming installment, because unfortunately, none of that appears in The Mousetrap. Everything about this film screams of being a rush job in order to get out ahead of the other Mickey Mouse horror films. Mouse of Horrors is streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Brendan Petrizzo and written by Harry Boxley and Marc Gottlieb. I didn't know this going in, but I guess the Mouse of Horrors is part of the Blood and Honey Poonaverse, which is sort of a connected universe run by Rhys Frake Waterfield, who's using cartoon and fairy tale characters, most from early Disney productions, and twisting them into horror cliches. I've yet to see the Pooh movies. I'm sure one of these days I'll take a deep dive into them like I did this Mickey Mouse one, so this film is actually my first taste of this connected universe, and let's just say that taste wasn't so hot. A group of teens send off their best friend, Chloe, played by Natasha Tosini, who is soon to leave the UK for the US. They travel to a local amusement park that happens to be the hideout of the evil Dr. Rupert, played by Chris Lynes, and his monstrous creations, the Killer, a monstrous man-sized mouse that vaguely resembles Mickey Mouse, played by Louis Santer, and the Bear, the Winnie the Pooh monster from the Blood and Honey series, played by Stephen Staley. As the night goes on, Rupert suggests a challenge between Mickey and Pooh to see how many people they can murder and bring back to him to use as parts to make the perfect mate for both of them. This prompts the two blasphemous representations of beloved cartoon characters to go on a rampage in the amusement park, stalk and kill Chloe and her friends for parts. Again, I'll start with the good. This version of Steamboat Willie at least tries to utilize the aspect of him being a sailor on a steamboat. While the scenes are limited, the film does start out with a series of murders on a boat, and then returns to that boat later in the movie. So kudos, I guess, for actually using Mickey Mouse's Steamboat Willie persona in the proper context. I also thought that this version of Mickey was brought to life in a more interesting way than simply being a latex mask, as it was in The Mousetrap. This Mickey has a workable jaw, and though the character doesn't talk, he is able to open his toothy, rat-like mouth wide, which he often does in order to lick the blades he's using while stalking menacingly. And while I can't say that this is a good performance, at least Louis Santer puts some gusto in the way Mickey prances around and playfully stalks his victims. Sure, it's reminiscent of the jester-like way Art the Clown moves, with a sense of style, grace, and attention to performance, but at least it differs from the Michael Myers trance movement of Pooh, which I found to be pretty underwhelming. The rest of the film is bad. The acting is rough from pretty much all the other cast, especially the two actors playing Chloe's parents. Those actors simply function as bowling pins to be toppled down by the two killers. And while most slasher films at least put some time and energy into the kills, Mouse of Horrors basically has Mickey slit throats and stab people with a knife. Using a singular weapon can be vivid and scary, a la the Scream franchise, which mainly uses a hunting knife, but only if someone puts some thought into it. Mouse of Horrors didn't seem like it wanted to be bothered, so it's just Mickey killing people in the same way over and over. The film culminates with a big battle between Mickey and Pooh, as these two brothers' competitive nature gets the better of them, and they fight. I guess if you'd seen the Blood and Honey films, and maybe even liked them, this might be interesting to you, but for me, it was just two guys in bad costumes swiping at each other for way too long, like Peter Griffin and that chicken from Family Guy. I wish more thought would have been put into some fight choreography and variation of kills, but Mouse of Horrors just doesn't have that sense of creativity. I guess Mouse of Horrors is building towards something, some kind of mega crossover with various monsterized public domain cartoon characters, but this one really didn't give me anything to spark my interest. The storyline was pretty straightforward, which is more than I could say for The Mousetrap, so I guess there's that. But this feels like another rushed script and production that again simply took advantage of a public domain character in the most unimaginative of ways. iHeart Willie was recently in select theaters, and it's coming soon to on demand from Rubey Entertainment and Hewes Films. It's directed by Alejandro G. Alegre and written by David Vaughn. A quartet of paranormal investigators head to Mexico to seek out a local legend, the ghost of the menace known as Mouse Boy, played by the writer David Vaughn. Mouse Boy was rumored to be the result of experiments done by Nazi scientists who created a vicious serial killer. Donning a mouse mask full of stitches, it was Walt Disney who used the story of Mouse Boy to come up with his first cartoon, Steamboat Willie. Now modern day, the investigators are going to find that this mass murder is very much still alive and still killing. Now, I'm not going to say that iHeart Willie is the best written or directed film in the recent deluge of Steamboat Willie horror flicks, but I do think it's one of the most imaginative. The film is capably directed by Mexican filmmaker Alejandro G. Alegre, and the production is nice and dank, as the bulk of the movie occurs in Willie's torture chamber. The acting is better than most lo-fi horror films, so at least you don't have to watch pretty people read straight from cue cards. One of them looks like a buffer version of Crispin Glover, so there's that. You get one typical nude scene and a kill about every 5 minutes, so the pacing is pretty okay too. But instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, iHeart Willie delivers a simple story, the most work seemingly put into the extremely specific backstory of the killer being the results of Mengele's experiments. The film is simple nevertheless, basically putting 4 youngsters into the middle of nowhere in Mexico and then having a masked monster hunt them down and kill them. There is a little story meat involving one of the investigators having an experience with Willie when she was a kid, but the focus of this film seems to be having Willie torture his victims to death slowly. Those who dislike the torture porn subgenre of horror will want to steer clear of iHeart Willie, but the film does offer up a few gnarly scenes where Willie paralyzes and skins his victims. Unlike the uninspired gore of Mouse of Horrors and the more cat and mouse heavy The Mousetrap, iHeart Willie takes the horror grimly and seriously, providing tons of spatter and gruesome scenes. Willie himself looks the scariest here as well. The Mickey Mouse mask is stitched together like a Disney-inspired version of Leatherface, and Willie's pupils are obscured with white lenses, giving him an unnatural deadite feel. Writer-actor David Vaughn is also quite big and buff, giving him an imposing image as he walks around most of the film shirtless. I also get the sense that as I watch these serial killer films, that the filmmakers are trying to make them the next big horror icon. Now, I'm not saying that Willie from iHeart Willie is going to be that next Art the Clown, but he is designed well and looks the best of the bunch. Even compared to pics of the upcoming Steamboat Willie, starring Terrifier's David Howard Thornton, iHeart Willie's Willie looks the scariest and is most memorable. Again, this is a very run-of-the-mill written movie, but if you're looking for shocks, gore, and that feeling that you're watching something just plain wrong, iHeart Willie is the one that is going to deliver the most genuine of horrors. Mouseboat Massacre is new on demand from ITN Distribution. It's directed by Andrea M. Catinella and written by Harry Boxley. Mimi, played by Lauren Leopard, suffers from a drug addiction, and her parents take her and her brother and sister to a remote house by the lake. Looking for something to watch on the television, Mimi stumbles across some old videotapes, one of which plays an old cartoon that summons a man in a mouse mask, played by Jay Robertson, who stalks and kills those around her. Mimi's screams fall on deaf ears as her parents believe all of these sightings of the killer are symptoms of withdrawal. Meanwhile, more blood is shed by a whistling masked killer. This is the second movie of this type I've seen involving a family bringing a drug-addicted member to a secluded place with their therapist in hopes to give them an intervention. This was the premise to Three Blind Mice, another riff on an old nursery rhyme, which was all the rage before low-budget filmmakers decided to prey upon public domain characters like Steamboat Willie. And since both Three Blind Mice and Mary Had a Little Lamb, another nursery rhyme slasher riff, were produced by the same company, and Mary Had a Little Lamb and Mouseboat Massacre are written by the same person, Harry Boxley, I do believe there's some kind of shenanigans afoot in repeating the premise of a story and simply changing the killer. Instead of 3 blind mouse monsters, though, this one has a bloodthirsty Mickey Mouse masked man who is summoned by playing a video cassette a la The Ring. I guess that's different enough. Harry Boxley seems to be a Steamboat aficionado, though, as he also wrote Mouse of Horrors, the film I previously covered, But it seems these two films are distinct from one another and not part of the shared Pooniverse alluded to in that travesty of a film. Mouseboat Massacre at least seems to have thought about how to make this Mickey scary, lighting the mouse man moodily enough. Jay Robertson plays the mouse as a slow-walking Michael Myers type, only moving quickly when he needs to slash and gouge someone. The film also manages to amp up the scares with a whistling echo, reminiscent of the whistling Mickey does in the cartoon, and it occurs every time Mickey goes in for the kill. These two details, as well as the brutality of the kills, makes this Mad Mouse stand out as one of the better versions of Steamboat Willie, though I still like the Willie in iHeart Willie the best. But the weight this Steamboat Willie leaves behind is bloody. Each scene hits on a visceral level, be it the mouse sawing away on someone's neck with a butcher knife, or one victim trying to stop a chainsaw by blocking it with his forearms. Taking a page from the Terrifier series, this killer puts some showmanship into his work with some toe-curling acts of bodily dismemberment. Why stop at one stab to the gut when 20 will do the same trick squelchier, I always say. That doesn't mean Mouseboat Massacre is a good movie. The mouse's origin is beyond idiotic and confusing as shit. Something about a mad scientist/sailor trapped at sea who befriends a mouse before he is rescued. Then the mad scientist/sailor splices the mouse with a death row inmate, and then somehow that mouse/death row inmate bleeds on a video cassette. Now the video cassette is haunted, and whoever plays it is stalked by the ghost of the mouse. I feel dumber having just read all of that. The non-ending is remedial as well, as it ends with an act that makes sense, but then immediately undercuts that end for a more lackluster end to the film. Mouseboat Massacre does some of the scares right through some nice and moody lighting and creepy sounds. It does have a distinct beginning and end, more that I can say from some of the other Steamboat Willie films, but man is this script dumb. So as long as you don't pay attention to the story, you're going to get some unbridled carnage and some spooky scenes with the mouse. For some people, that's going to be enough. Just look at the success of the Terrifier series. But so far, I have yet to see a Steamboat Willie adaptation that is even close to worth recommending. Screamboat. This is an advanced review from Deskpop Entertainment. It recently played on April 2nd in select theaters. It's directed and written by Stephen Lamorte. A group of New Yorkers, including a gaggle of party gals who resemble Disney princesses, take a routine ride on the Staten Island ferry. But on this night, a 90-year-old creature has been awakened in the bowels of the ship. A diminutive but deadly mouse named Willie, played by Terrifier's Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, stalks the ship with a lust for blood and carnage. I had a chance to see an advanced showing of Screamboat, the most high-profile of the Steamboat Willie public domain films, and while I can't say this is a movie that will blow your mind with bold new ideas, I found myself pleasantly surprised at how entertaining the whole thing turned out to be. By far, of all the films I've covered this time around, this has the best production values. This one also actually uses some imagination with Willie, and in its own sick way, honors the classic cartoon and Disney as a whole. One of the things that frustrated me about a lot of these films is that not a lot of interesting ideas are plumbed from the source material. In Screamboat, Willie isn't just a killer in a mouse mask. This Willie is actually mouse-sized, and that simple detail actually makes things a whole lot more interesting. Sure, seeing anyone in a mask covered with blood is going to make you pause, but seeing a 10-inch man-shaped mouse walking around with a grimace and murderous rage is a whole nother level of creepy. Yes, Willie looks goofy in his furry little costume, but just as Thornton's Art the Clown takes sadistic glee in taking people apart piece by piece, Thornton delivers another fun pantomime performance as the sneering mini-monster who whistles while he works weapons into the heads and hearts of all of those on board his ferry. Now, I can't say that I was ever scared while watching Screamboat, but this was fast-paced and there were tons of gory scenes of mouse-on-passenger violence. It's not Terrifier levels of gruesome depravity, but the blood does indeed floweth here. What really impressed me was the effort put into the script to incorporate the history of the Steamboat Willie cartoon in creative ways. Screamboat treats the cartoon as if it actually occurred. Time was taken to make a cohesive story around a man named Walt D., mad science, and a rat. It's a tragic story where the rat was trapped in the engine room of the ferry for all of this time. Of course, when finally released, that rat is going to be pissed. Not the most complex motivation, but at least they're putting some thought into motivation and backstory. It's more than a lot of the films have done. Screamboat is also littered with winks and nods to Disney lore. His victims are wearing modern version of the Disney princesses' costumes. Lines are swiped straight from cartoons and popular Disney songs. While the danger is dire and there is quite a body count, this attention to where Steamboat Willie came from made the whole thing more entertaining. While watching Screamboat, I was reminded of Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Goes to Manhattan. Now that movie is no monument of good filmmaking, but it is a fun movie I've returned to numerous times. Screamboat is that level of movie. It's definitely gorier than Jason Goes to Manhattan, and even makes a little more sense. I mean, Jason teleporting and toxic sludge in the sewers? What the hell? Screamboat is better than that. I know that's a low bar to hurdle, but out of those two slasher films set on a boat, I think I'll choose Screamboat. And that's worth something with me being a huge fan of the Friday the 13th series. Screamboat is fun, plain and simple. It accomplishes what few of the other Steamboat Willie films have. Quite simply, it was entertaining and actually tried a bit to be more than just a killer in a mask flick. It also delivers the gore, and Thornton makes another decent turn as an iconic slasher. All of that, and there's a respect to the original cartoon that I don't think the others have. So those were 5 new Steamboat Willie horror films. I doubt any of them are going to be showing up on my list of best horror films of the year, but some of them have merit. I think if you put all of them in a bag, you might actually get one good movie out of it. The Mousetrap had promise and was first out of the gate with the concept, but its script was all over the place. Same goes for the tame and by-the-numbers Mouse of Horrors. If you're looking for a grindhouse grit and grime, iHeart Willie is the one to check out. It's the one that made me feel the filthiest after watching, which is indeed a compliment. The scariest of the bunch was the splattery Mouseboat Massacre with a Michael Myers-esque whistling Mickey Mouse, and Screamboat proved to be the only one who seemed to take some time with the plot and honored the original cartoon, which truly sets it apart from the rest. While I don't want to be a horror prude, I will say that I wish more thought was put into these public domain properties. Simply making them a slasher is not enough. Next time on Public Domain Horrors, I'll be checking out the various versions of Popeye, as there's been a flurry of those films released recently. I'll see you then. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside